Hi besties, today we're going to be doing a Galinda inspired look in honor of the new Wicked movie. I'm super excited to show you how I did this, so let's get into it. And don't worry, only my intro, my outro, or voiceover. I kinda had some mic problems. Anyways, now let's get into it. Let's get started. For our Galinda look, I want to do an inspired look because realistically, the makeup for the film is very minimal, but I really want to get creative with it. But the one thing that I am going to keep the same is, or semi the same, is I'm not going to do much to the eyebrows because obviously I'm not blonde, and obviously if I were to add too much product to my brows or products at all because I have very dark eyebrows, I feel like it would be doing a little bit too much, and I feel like this slightly ties in that kind of concept of minimalism, even though we're going to do a lot on the eyes, to be honest. Trying to make a world where the creativity and the tie-in can live in harmony. I want a really nice and crispy base today, so I'm using my Makeup Forever concealer to carve out my eyebrows and use this primer for my eyeshadow. This shade in particular is a lot lighter than my normal skin tone. It's really going to be great for giving as much color payoff as possible when it comes to our eyeshadow, especially since we're working with pinks. I really want those to pop as much as possible. So I'm just carving my eyebrow and blending everything downwards. I still want to keep my layer of concealer quite thin, especially since this concealer in particular dries down quite matte. When you're doing a lot of layering, you don't want thick layers so that they don't bunch up. I'm using my stiffer concealer brush to really blend that and make sure that it's not super harsh, especially up in this little area by my eyebrow where I carved it. And once I have that down, I'm going to set it with some translucent powder, just like that. And now I'm going to repeat my steps on the other side. Also, look at my Galinda crown. It's not exactly like hers, but it's the one I have. So if you guys have watched any of my other videos, I've talked about how this eyebrow is a lot sparser than this one. For this look, I'm just going to let it be and try to make them as symmetrical as possible in the front area. I want to keep these quite natural. I'm just going to work with what I already got, blending that all downwards. Also, I've been sick, so bear with me if my voice sounds weird. There's going to be a lot of cutouts that I'm going to have to make of me just coughing. I couldn't not do this look this week because premieres this week. I already have my tickets for this Saturday to go watch it. I'm doing the same, blending out, especially underneath that brow, and setting that in place. And we should look a little bit like this. Before I move on, let's put on our contacts because you guys know I'm very good at forgetting to do that and then doing everything and then tearing up afterwards. So I'm gonna apply my contacts and I'll be right back. And now that my eye color has magically changed, I picked out these more subtle contacts, but they still have pink and blue in them, and I felt like the pink was perfect for Galinda, and then the blue I feel like gives a little bit homage to part 2 of Wicked with the blue dress. I thought they would really pull the look together. I'm going to use a variety of palettes for my eyes, one of them being the Viseart Volume 1 palette. In my last video I used the Volume 3 palette. This was just a more neutral tone. I'm going to be using the pinks in here. You guys know how I love an angled brush. I'm going to start off with the darkest pink shade in that palette. I'm going to start applying that on the inner part of my eye, really trying to focus in that color as much as possible. Like I said, we're using pale colors, so it's gonna take a little bit of a harsher hand to really get them to pop. I'm basically creating a C and then feathering it out kind of towards my eyebrow, getting as much pigment as I can off of it before I start to go back and forth, fading it outwards. And I like fading out pinks because they usually fade out nicely. We're going for almost a kind of graphic liner without the liner look. I still want to keep those pastels and that daintiness of Galinda, but I wanted to make it a little bit more elevated for the creativity aspect. Once I have that down, I'm going back and forth over those edges. Once I have that sort of shape down, I'm going to go in with my concealer once again in my flat brush. I'm using my tear duct as a guide. I'm going to cut this to make it super straight, almost like a wing. I'm just gonna stamp and drag, and I'm kind of aiming for this to go outwards. We're aiming to leave room for another segment right next to it. Once I have my concealer down, I'm blending that downwards always. Once that's done, I'm using the nude shade in that same palette to set this in place. Now going back in with my pink, I'm gonna re-intensify my line just to make sure it's as pigmented as I could possibly get it. Pinks tend to be a lot more muted, so you really want to give them the attention they need. need. I kind of carried this wing all the way a little bit past my eyebrow, just because it's a little awkward if you cut it off just right here. So even if it's just slightly, I like to extend it outwards a little bit, just to give it that kind of lifted effect. Now that that's done, we're basically going to do a mirroring image right next to it, but it's going to be lower to where we're going to leave some negative space right here. So I'm just going to kind of stamp right here, make sure I leave some room. And this one's going to extend farther than my initial one. Doing the same technique as before, kind of caving it inwards towards the other one. This one's going to be much more of just an eyeliner, more than faded out as much, because we want to keep that little space in between. I'm fading it all the way outwards towards my hairline. Once I have that down, I'm going to go in once again with our concealer, carving that out and then blending downwards as always. I'm setting it with that lightest shade in that same palette. And this is what we're looking like so far. Before we move on to anything else, I'm going to repeat my steps on the other side. Starting the same way with my inner corner, just dragging that product across. Tilling it out. Once you have that blended, cut your crease. Every now and then, I'm just kind of looking in the mirror straightforward just to see the symmetry aspect. I'm using a fluffy brush to set because it gives you a lighter layer. Now we're creating our mirroring wing, leaving that little itty bitty negative space. I've said it multiple times, I'll say it again, concealer is our bestie, so let's cut our shape better with some concealer. We're ready to move on. For our lids, I wanted to do something very shimmery, just because I feel like that just is Galinda's vibe. I'm using my 35C palette from Morphe. I'll be using the shimmery shade up here along with this pretty pink center shade as well. Taking that first shimmery white shade on a brush, I'm going to start with my inner corner on the whole inner part of my lid and letting that kind of fade into my negative space by using just the tip of the brush and kind of stopping at the a little bit past halfway mark. Taking another brush and on that pink shade, overlap the center and then beginning to wing it out. We're kind of going for almost a gradient effect. Once we have that down, I'm going to repeat it on the other side, starting with that beautiful shimmery white. I truly think that this shade is so absolutely beautiful, and it just applies like butter. Switching over to my pink, making my sort of wing. We're ready to move on to our base for now. Before adding any face products, take a makeup wipe and make sure you take off any shimmer because you don't want that to mix in with your base. For my base today, I'm using the Anastasia Luminous Foundation because I want a skin-like feel. This is one of my favorite foundations. I'm just going to begin to apply that like I would normally. So I'm applying it with a brush just because that's my favorite way to apply foundation. Being very careful when it comes to getting close to my eye look. Being careful around my eyebrow area and my hairline area, which by the way, I'm so not used to having my hair completely pulled back, but I try to recreate my Galinda hairdo as much as I could. I tried my best, but I'm very insecure about my face shape, so I'm like weirded out having it all pulled back, but I just felt like I had to for this look. Once that's applied, I'm gonna go into blush. I'm using a very pink blush. This was quite bright, but it's going to settle down the way we blend it out. Using that same little dollop on both sides, kind of spreading it apart. And don't worry if you look too crazy because we're going to fix it. I want this look to be very blush heavy, so having a liquid blush as a base is really the way to go. The key with liquid blushes is to just keep blending. They're intimidating and I didn't want to use them at first, but honestly they give you the prettiest results. I'm really focusing it on the apples of my cheeks. And this is only the base of our blush because we're going to be adding a powder on top as well. I feel like having these layers really affect the final product. I feel like it's just worth it to layer. Once I'm blended to about there, I'm going to add my concealer. I'm using my e.l.f. Hydrating Concealer. I'm also adding it to my forehead and my chin. I'm going to start blending this, focusing it on the inner corner first. Then I'm feathering it out into my blush. Blending out my forehead as well and my chin. Once that's done, I'm setting my under eye and my blush using a translucent powder. You guys know how I love translucent powders. You can see it just kind of marries the products together. And it really mutes that blush, but it's still present. Also setting the other areas where I applied concealer. For the outer parts of my face, I'm using a pressed powder. This one's by Lancome. I'm taking it on a fluffy brush, so it's not too heavy. I'm just setting the rest of my face. Once that's done, let's continue with the face. I'm going to add a little bit of bronzer. I'm going to be using the LA Girl Lustrous Bronzer and I'm going to be only using the lighter shade. On a smaller fluffy brush, I'm just kind of swirling that by my ear. I'm also applying that to my temples and a little bit underneath my jawline. And I'm using that blush as a guide of my placement as well, making sure I keep it underneath and slowly swirling the two together. Once I have that down, I'm taking a small fluffy brush, a little bit of powder, and I'm gonna kind of fade out my edges, especially on my temples, to avoid too much harshness. Now that that's done, we're going to continue with more blush. I'm using this one from NARS. This one is in shade Gaiety. This is a very pinky, fuchsia-y toned pink. I'm going to apply that on a fluffy brush, focusing it on the same areas as before and fading it into my under eye slightly. And then I'm using the same method that I used with my bronzer, and I'm going to take some powder and I'm just really going to fade that into the rest of my base. Doing that on both sides. Again, adding my powder. Now we're going to move on to our under eyes. Going back into the pink shade we were using earlier, we're going to apply this all over our bottom lash line and just kind of fade it downwards. I'm using the same angled brush because I like to be resourceful. Even though it's subtle, it does a lot to shape the form of our eyeshadow. It kind of confines this little shimmery bit. Pale pinks are super subtle, but don't underestimate them too much because they still add a beautiful accent. I think that's why they're so popular when it comes to bridal makeup. They just add so much without doing too much, if that makes sense. Once my pink is down, I'm going back in with that white shimmery shade that we used all over our lid, and I'm connecting it and dragging it towards my inner corner. The shade is so pretty. Now that our under eye is done, we can move on to our lips. For my lips, I wanted to do a pinky nude, so I'm using this Ink Velvet lip tint from Para. I'm basically going to apply it to the center of my lips and then fade it outwards with my finger. It's a really pretty shade, and then I'm just going to fade that all out. I don't want to have super defined lips, so I'm not lining them today. I just want this super faded out and not too prominent. I'm adding this holographic lip gloss from LA Girl. I truly think this one's super Galinda. It's a slightly darker pink, which I feel really ties in the lip color. It just has all these little specks of glitter that I find so pretty. I'm using Lancome mascara for my eyes. I'm going to apply that to my top and bottom lashes. This is one of my all-time favorite mascaras. I use it almost every day. Mascara is really going to pop in a look like this because we're using such fair shades on our eyes. So if you're wearing black mascara or even brown mascara, it's really going to make your lashes pop. For my lashes, I'm using these very flared out cat eye lashes just because I saw that Ariana Grande has been using this kind of style lately, and even in her Galinda makeup, it seems like they're a little bit more flared out. I think these are a perfect look for this. I also really like these because they have a clear lash band. I'm using clear lash glue. I like to apply my lash glue to both my lashes and my lash line just so my lashes don't have anywhere else to go and it's less likely that they'll get messy. I like using tweezers to place my lashes a lot of the time. It really helps with inner corners especially. I let them dry a little bit before I kind of press them together. While this one dries a little bit more, I'm going to move on to the other eye. On this side as well. Once that's a little dry, I'm just going to curl my eyelashes to really stand them all up. And although I want to continue with keeping this look kind of soft, I am going to add mascara to the ends of my lashes just so they really pop to emphasize that curl at the end. We have a few finishing touches before we're done. One of them being these little pearlescent pearls. I'm going to be applying one on each side and I'm going to do the pink ones. I'm going to apply some lash glue at the end of my eye look, kind of by my temple. I'm taking my pearl and I'm just going to add it right there. This reminds me of Galinda's bubble, and I'm just going to do the same on this side. Right there. And now we have our little Galinda bubble on each side. And finally, I'm going to add a pink toned highlighter. This one's from ColourPop in shade Flexitarian. It's kind of a champagne-y pink. A lot of people hate on fan brushes, but honestly, I'm still a fan.
And this is the part where I usually say, and just like that, this look is complete. Except my mic died and I didn't even notice because I'm like really smart. But while you guys watch me ramble in silence, I just want to thank you guys for watching. And if you like this look, make sure you like this video and comment any other looks you'd like to see. If you try any of my looks, tag me so I can like, repost, and follow you guys. All of my socials are in my description, and I'll catch you guys in the next video with no mic problems. I promise. Bye besties.